This is a story that has come out of the new JFK files in the last 20 years, completely unknown to the Warren Commission or the House Select Committee on Assassinations. So never investigated. Okay, it only came out in the late 90s. George Joannides was the chief of covert action operations at the CIA station in Miami. The CIA station in Miami in 1963 was the largest CIA station in the world because they were waging a secret war on Fidel Castro's communist government in Cuba, in nearby Cuba. In that operation, George Joannides was a rising middle-level officer, I would say, and he was in charge of the covert action branch. One of his assignments as a case officer was to handle a group of Cuban students called the Cuban Student Directorate, which was students who were opposed to Castro's government. And they were a large, effective organization. There was a lot of young people passionately opposed to Castro. And so the CIA funded them to support their efforts. Oswald presented himself as a supporter of Castro, which was quite unusual in a conservative southern city like New Orleans. And he immediately attracted the attention of these Cuban students who were supported by the CIA. And so over the course of several weeks, there was a series of confrontations where Oswald handed out pamphlets on the street, and the Cuban students got into a fight with him. How dare he hand out pamphlets? They challenged him to a debate on the radio. They went to court, and there was a courtroom appearance that was covered by the local court. So there's a flurry of press coverage that's generated by the confrontation between the Cuban Student Directorate and this guy named Oswald. Well, what we only learned in the last 20 years was that that group was run by the CIA and was run by this man named George Joannides, and that he was a high-placed spy. He was a branch chief in the CIA station in Miami, and he's not a rogue actor in any way, shape, or form. We know a lot about him, and he was a very diligent officer who was responding to the orders of his superiors in Washington at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. So this group generates a lot of propaganda about Oswald. When the president is killed and Oswald is arrested on November 22nd, 1963, this CIA-funded group goes to the press and says, we know all about the guy who killed the president. He's a supporter of Castro. And so the next day, there's headlines all over the country, Kennedy killed by pro-Castro gunmen. That story originated with a CIA propaganda group run by George Joannides. So that was one new part of the story that was interesting and striking that we learned. But there's a second part of it that makes it even more interesting, which is 15 years later, late 1970s, 15 years after the assassination, Congress reopens the investigation. A lot has been learned about the CIA and assassination plots. A lot's been learned about the CIA and Watergate. Whole different attitude towards the CIA from 15 years earlier. And so they reinvestigate. And so the Congress creates what was called the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Mm-hmm. And they hire a staff and they go to investigate. And so they start sending their investigators to the CIA. We want to interview these people about the events of 1963. We want to find these documents and all that. The CIA calls this man, George Joannides, out of retirement, the guy who had been handling the Cuban students who knew Oswald in 1963, and they bring him back, and he serves as the intermediary between the CIA and the investigators. Well, one of the questions they ask him is, so who was working with these Cuban students back in 1963? Because we know they got CIA support. Who was the officer who was handling them? George Joannides, he himself was the answer to the question. And so he lies to them and he says, I don't know. I'll get back to you. And he never tells them. So as Dan Hardway related yesterday, he told the story of having the meeting with Joannides face to face where he fooled him. And he said, he obstructed our investigation. And so it was pretty much, irrefutable truth of the centrality of this man in the cover-up. And now, that was 1978. we're still waiting for a personnel file that has a lot of information about the intelligence methods and the cover and the activities that he was doing in this period. Okay. Now, we don't know what's in that file. And, I'm not saying it's not, a plot to kill the president, but it's a very tightly held CIA operation involving Lee Harvey Oswald. That's what they're sitting on. That's what they can't release. And so this is the test of Trump's order is, can he force them to release it? What they're holding back is what they want to hide the most, almost by definition, right? It's the thing that they're going to surrender last. So this is where it's crunch time. It's the end game on JFK files because this file, if it's made public, will have a big impact on how people think about the CIA and the JFK assassination. I'll just put it that way.